Okay. Yeah, someone was curious why we switched the order. I know it's a little disturbing. Everyone wants to be basically on the same schedule. So the reason is that simply I will not be able to be here tomorrow because we have a wedding in California of a grandson. So I will not be able to be here. And I won't be here on Wednesday, and I won't be here next Monday. And maybe Tuesday I'll be able to be back. So that's the best I can do. California, you can't really walk around the corner. You can't drive down either if you want to. Okay, so let us speak on the Parsha of the week as we usually do. And the Parsha is Parsha's Metzoirah. We don't usually have much opportunity to speak about Metzoirah per se, because in the Parsha Metzoirah, because Metzoirah is usually most of the time it's joined together with Tazriya Metzoirah together. So you don't have a chance really to focus in on particular terms, words in Parsha Metzoirah. It's an interesting thing. The Rebbe points out in a Sikha. Metzoirah is not a very complimentary word. You know what that means, complimentary? Huh? Not nice, right? It's not a very, if somebody is a Metzoirah is not even allowed to be within the community. He has to be outside of the community, worse than any other tongue, all the way outside. Out of town. Not just out of the shul, out of town. That Metzoirah has to be mechutz lamachana. And yet, this Pasha we call Pasha Metzoirah. And the Rebbe points out an interesting thing, that this name, Metzoirah, the names of the Pashas are really tradition. It's how Eden got traditionally it's a minhag to call it. But minhag Yisrael Toirahu, and there is a reason why it kind of develops that this becomes the name of the Pasha. In many centuries ago, like in Rashi in the years of the Rishonim, the Pasha wasn't called Metzoirah, it was called Zois Tihya. Zois Tihya, the first two words of the Pasha. And later on, it began to be called Metzoirah. So, the Rebbe explains a very interesting inyan. I'll bring it out briefly. Metzoirah is mechutz lamachane, is outside of the camp, and as such, a Metzoirah means he is completely secluded, and the reason he's secluded, obviously, there was a lot of impurity, a lot of sin, a lot of inappropriate things that had got attached. And in order to bring him to tshuva, it's not an easy thing. He will not awaken on his own to come to tshuva. It has to be something that has to come from outside. That's why the inyan of tshuva for the Metzoirah in the original name was Zeis Tihya Toiras. The future, he too will come to tshuva, because we have a guarantee that all Yidden will eventually do tshuva. So Zeis Tihya means that this is speaking about the future of the Metzoirah, and the future he too will come to tshuva. But as times progress and as we come closer and closer to the end of time, to the time of Mashiach, to the time of the ultimate revelation, then the Metzoirah begins to awaken on his own, and he's much more prone to tshuva, much more prone to seek purification. On the other hand, a Metzoirah is really a kind of a paradoxical phenomenon. Metzoirah, as it's explained in the Foshim, in Gemara, Metzoirah, the Tzoras that the Torah speaks about, is a very superficial in discoloration. It's not a deep-seated sickness. He can be perfectly healthy. Excuse me. He can be perfectly healthy. There's a discoloration on his skin, very superficial. And that is the leprotic symbol. And as a result of that, he becomes Tomei, and he sent him Chus Lamachane, and so forth. And it's explained in Chassidus that in fact the Metzoirah is internally very, very healthy. Not only physically, but spiritually. That's why there's a question why, when the Torah begins to speak about the Metzoirah, in last week's Parsha, it says, Odom ki yeh be'ir besori. An Odom, and in the skin of his flesh will be some kind of a discoloration. And the term Odom is used, not just Ish or anything like that. Odom is the most prestigious reference to the human being. You know that the human being in the Torah is called by 4 different names. Odom, Ish, Geber, and Enosh. And Odom is Orisha. Odom is the level that one should aspire to reach, to become an Odom. And yet when it speaks about the Tzoras, this most prestigious reference is used to describe the person who had the Tzoras. So it's explained in Chassidus that the reason for that is that in fact the Tzoras is something very superficial on the skin, which means that the person is really very perfect internally in all aspects. There is some impurity, and this impurity that was left is now being pushed out from inside to the outside, and it shows up on his skin. This is all it is. This superficial impurity that gets pushed out because he's internally so healthy that any impurity gets pushed outside. And this declares him as a Metzoirah and makes him the most impure, in terms of the halacha, the most impure person. No one else has to be pushed away from the community to such an extent. And, there's a din of Tumas Bia. It means if there's a dead body in a house, so then the oil, the impurity of of a mess, Tumas mess, affects everything in the house. All the kelim or the food become tomei, tumas mess. There's no other tumah that makes tumah of this type of thing that if you're under the same roof becomes tomei. except for Metzoirah. He makes everything Toma, even by being, not by touch, even by being in the same environment. So here we're talking about a person who has reached, so to speak, the epitome in the highest levels, and the fact of his health is such that it pushes all impurities outside, and it becomes so impure that it's most the extreme of all these impurities, and he has to be separated and so forth. How do we understand this? And clearly, what we are interested is not something, just of a academic kind of an understanding. But we want to understand it in a way that would be meaningful for us. Everything in the Torah, the Rebbe says, has a continuous meaning for all people under all circumstances and in all times. Just to take it, to simplify things a little bit. In a person's growth pattern, Nachum, you with me? As a person develops and grows and learns, throughout the entire process, all growth, like for instance, a child goes to first grade, then finishes the first grade and goes into second grade. What happens between the first and second grade? It's really a continuation, right? First grade, second grade. It could be one grade and just continue to grow. Yet we say no, it has to graduate, it has to step out of this level and go into another level. And then he steps out of that level and goes to a new level. And we have what we call primary school, which is up to a certain grade, and then we have intermediate school, and we have a high school, and then we have a mesivta and so forth. Everything has certain demarcations, and then there is a step over. There is significance to this. And I want to give a very simple analogy for this principle. I believe we spoke about it in the past. A human being is called a mahalech. Mahalech means that by nature he has the ability to walk. Walk does not mean walk physically, which is certainly demonstrative of it, but the idea of walking means to be able to move, just like walking is something which moves a person from one place to another. Malochim, in contrast, are called oimdim. They're standing still in one place. And human beings are mahalchim. What is the difference? The difference, malochim, standing still does not mean that one does not grow. One can grow while standing still. What is a standing still principle? Just like let's project a situation where a person is standing on the ground, and then he puts up a brick and stands up on the brick. So now he can see much further than he was able to see before. Then puts up another brick on top of that, and now he can see even further. And he can climb indefinitely this way. He can see further and further and further. He grows, and in terms of ruchnius means he learns and he grows and he sees much further and much clearer what he couldn't see before, he couldn't even imagine existed before. But in the final analysis, he is actually founded in the same place. He hasn't moved away. From the place where he is able to see further. So everything that he sees, he's actually projecting. He hasn't moved. Fundamentally, he hasn't changed. He knows more, he sees more, but he hasn't changed. He is still founded in the same place. A mahalich means, imagine this. If a person puts up a brick just 1 foot up, really by stepping up 1 foot up, you can see miles further than you saw before. It's a quick lift. If you take 1 step, you can hardly, you advance one foot ahead. You can see 1 foot further. Not much. The advance is very small. But the difference is that you actually advanced. You changed your position, and you actually advanced to a new place. A place that you could not fathom before, you could not relate to before. And now you're able to break through and advance. And if we take this analogy further down, these are all very realistic things in people's growth and people's experience. If you take the analogy to the greatest degree of detail, when a person walks, the walking process is by making a step at a time. And how do you make a step? You put 1 foot forward, while the other foot is still in the same place where it was before. In other words, you start off where you start off. You put 1 foot forward. Oh, I want to go there. I want to see what this is. I want to get to know this. Okay, so you put 1 foot forward. The other foot is still anchored where it was before. So at this point, when you may put the 1 foot forward, you still haven't moved because you're still anchored where you were before. This is like being undecided. I'm here and I'm here. I cannot dissociate, break away from where I was before. But I'm interested, this looks interesting. So you put foot forward. When do you finally break away and move the other foot along to join the first foot? When you have acquired a relationship, a connection to the new place in such a way that you no longer want to be anchored in the previous place. This becomes your anchor. This becomes your reality. Then you can move the foot forward. This is a complete move away. It's not an intellectual move. It's not just, I see what it is, curious. This is a complete transfer. That is a real process of growth. It would seem odd. Why do you make such a big fuss about it? Right? I'm learned. I know everything about this place. So what's missing? You learned, you know everything about this place. If you really understood this place through and through and completely in its full depth, then you would not want to be anchored in the previous place. You will not be fully in here. If you're not fully in here, that means that, yes, you know it and so forth, but there's something is still missing. And that's why you don't make the final step.
Too quick,
huh?
Like thinking about being in one place and you're in one place type deal too?
What is still missing? What is still missing? How do we define that which is still missing? It would seem to be a totally superficial thing. I'm standing here and I'm learning what's going over here. And I know everything about it. So what's the difference if I'm here and learning about this, or I actually stepped in here? What's the big difference? It's skin deep. It's just a superficial thing, like the Metzoirah, just like a skin. I know everything already about it. And I really understand it. You can test me any place. But I still retain my place where I was before. I still can't make that decision. I can't make the complete breakaway. I do not recognize this new place as a reality. I see it from a distance, even though it's very interesting and I know everything about it. The pulling up the second foot is infinitely more difficult than to making move the first foot forward. To move the first foot forward is not so difficult at all. You know, it seems interesting. There's so much to do and so much to learn, and it's engaging, and I can prove myself, and so forth. The moving of the last and second foot along is not a big accomplishment. There's nothing to show for it. It's just a commitment, just a realization that this is the reality. Big deal. There's nothing to show for it. But this is where the real test and the real challenge is. This making the final decision, the final move. You know, it's an interesting thing. When we say Shemoneh Esrei, Shemoneh Esrei means the Tfilas HaAmidah, for those who don't know. You know, when down Shemoneh Esrei. Shemoneh Esrei, the Tfilah. So the din is that you have to stand with both feet together. You must not look around. You must not look out. You have to be fully focused on one thing, and if you don't look in the cedar, you have to close your eyes. Not to be disturbed, to be completely isolated from everything else. What's going on in your mind at that time? It's important that you think about it. But if you don't, it's also Yotzei Tefillah. You know, not everyone, and many of us are not on that ability to be concentrated all the time as we're davening Shemoneh Esrei. All kinds of thoughts flow into our minds. We are distracted by all kinds of internal thoughts that come up. Yes, it's not the best way. Surely one has to be able to be focused, but not everyone has that power of intelligence to be focused the whole time. From time to time, I remind myself, I'm studying Shemoneh Esrei. I'm really doing something. But regardless, whatever your thoughts are, you have to stand still. And the actual expression in the Shulchan Aruch, this is an amazing thing. The actual expression in the Shulchan Aruch is the appearance of standing in front of a king. You'll be amazed, right? The appearance of standing in front of the king. What is this? This is the Jewish religion? This is Chabad? This is Torah. Aren't we supposed to be learning and truly recognizing what we're doing and being fully into it? The Shulchan Aruch says it has to be the appearance, nira, that you're standing in front of the king. What does this tell us? In terms of our intelligence, we have a lot of variations, a lot of differences. Not everyone is on the same level. And it takes time to grow intellectually. One has to train his mind to focus. It takes time to train his mind to focus and get to know what I'm saying and to understand the insights and the secrets that are described in these brachas and so forth. You say in the bracha, T'kar b'shefa godel cheroseinu. You should blow with a great shefa for our freedom. most of us don't even know what you're talking about. What is this big shofar? Why do you have to blow the shofar? What is this all about? You have to learn. You have to have a lot of, there's a lot of background to know, to be able to just even make sense of what you're saying. A little bit, I want to be free. But a big shofar should blow, and who should blow it? Many of us, I wouldn't say most of us, and nobody should take it personally, but many of us don't know what this is about. And yet, that doesn't matter. It's okay. Provided that you stand still and you appear like you're standing in front of the king. And that's the Shemoneh Esrei. And doing that, saying Shemoneh Esrei, if you think of all the words that you think, you have little kavanas, but at the same time you're saying hello to a friend as well, with a little swing of the hand, and you look around, you are not doing Shemoneh Esrei. You're profaning the whole Shemoneh Esrei. And if you're standing still and you're focusing in the seat and you're saying the words, and you really don't know, and your mind is elsewhere, but you appear like you're standing in front of the king, you're doing Shemoneh Esrei properly. What is this? To recognize that you're standing in front of the king in this world of ours means to recognize that the absolute truth is that the world belongs to Hashem. And Hashem is everywhere. That's my statement. Whether I understand, whether I can relate to it, whether I'm up to that intellectually, that's immaterial. But this is the truth. This is my statement. This is what I stand for. If one is, as I said, knows everything, he's imbued with all the things, but he fails in this one little less moving of the left foot forward and saying, yeah, this is the truth. This is the truth. Hashem is everywhere, and I stand in front of Hashem. And he says, wait a second, let's first learn what it says. I understand, I know much more about what it says than all of you guys standing over here. He knows what it says, but he doesn't know about godly presence. He doesn't accept the godly presence. So what he's missing is something that is skin deep. Just 1 foot forward, the last foot. The first foot, and that one that makes the first breakthrough, the first search, the intellectual statement, he's got it. But he fails to bring the next foot forward along with it. And as a result of that, he still remains where he was before. Essentially, he is in the same place where he was before. Despite all the learning and all the knowledge and all the experience that he has had. I once mentioned to you a story of the Rebbe Maharash. Rebbe Maharash was a child, a very lively child. And once in the courtyard of the Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek was the Rebbe at the time, and he was a young child, playing with his friends in the courtyard. And their play was that challenged each other. There was a ladder standing, leaning against the wall, a tall ladder. They were challenging each other how far each one can climb up the ladder. How far you can go. So there was a row of boys, this one is climbing up to a certain level, then turns around. It gets too scary. Then somebody climbs up a few steps further, he comes down. Each one goes up to a certain level, and he comes down. He gets scared. Then comes the turn of the Rebbe Maharash. He was a kid amongst kids. He gets up on this ladder and goes all the way to the top. All the way to the top, and comes down. Okay? So in other words, he really won the contest, hands down. And the Tzemach Tzedek, his father, who was Rebbe at the time, watched this whole game through his window. And he saw what was happening. So then afterwards, he asked the son, what was the reason that the boys, all of them, went up a certain height and then they came down and you went all the way up? So the Rebbe answered him like a child. He says, hey, they didn't understand. He says, it's very simple. As you're climbing up, you're not allowed to look down. If you look down, you lose, your head begins to spin. You get scared. They all look down, look back. And that's why they had to come down. I didn't look back. I just went up straight up. So therefore, I was able to go all the way up and come down. That was his answer. Okay. So I was thinking, what was this? What was Tzemach Tzedek engaging the Rebbe Maharash in this childish discussion? It wasn't a childish discussion at all. The Tzemach Tzedek wanted to make the Rebbe Maharash aware of the phenomenon. And what was the phenomenon? The phenomenon is the following. The ladder is standing on the ground. So the ground, this is your base. Right? This is where you feel secure and this is where you belong. As you're climbing up, you move away further and further away from your base. So all the boys, they're moving on one step, another step. I have to know that I'm still related to the base. I can still see the ground where I'm coming from. Because right in the middle of the air, I can't be. I have to. So therefore, he looks back to see the ground. So up at a certain point, he can look at the ground and still relate to it. When he goes a little further up, then the ground seems to be too remote, too far away, and he feels dissociated, and he feels scared. He has to feel that he's on the ground. He can't feel that he's on the air. He has to come down. And he has no choice. He has to look back because he needs to have the sense of his base. Where do I belong? To be right here in the middle of the air, I can't. That's not a place. The Rebbe Maharash, he didn't look back, and he didn't have to look back. Because his base wasn't the ground. His base was wherever the Rebbe puts him, that's where he is. His base is the godly reality. He didn't trust the ground for his security. He is wherever the Rebbe is. And the Rebbe is on the ground. The Rebbe is on the ladder. And on top of the ladder, he didn't have to look back. That's why he didn't look back. So when he moved, he moved. He's not scared to move away from his base. Wherever I am, that's what the base is. This is the principle of growth. And this is why it's so important to be a mahalach, to be able to move both feet forward, not just one, and keep one foot in back, just in case. You know the story of Haran. Avraham Avinu had a brother Haran. Everyone knows the story, right? When Nimrod took Avraham, and Avraham declared that he doesn't believe in all of these idols. And Nimrod took Avraham and he threw him into fire. And his brother Haran was sitting there. So the asked Haran, knew what are you, in whose camp are you? Are you with Avraham or are you with us? So Haran held out. He said to himself, I'll wait to see what happens. If Avram comes up alive, then I'm with Avram. If he doesn't, then I'm with Nimrod. So when Avram came out, so he says, I'm with Avram. So they took him and threw him into the fire. And of course, he never came back. Because you can't be truly here and keep one foot out. The real decision, the real identifying element in the person is not how much you know about this, where you're going. It is, where are you? Where do I belong? And as we said, this becomes obvious. This is identified from the outside. I don't know what's going on in my mind, but I know I'm standing in front of the king. Because the king is everywhere. That is a much more profound, deep, true declaration than learning and knowing everything about it. And this is illustrated by this halacha, by this din of the Metzoirah. As we said, the Metzoirah is Odom. This is the person who has reached the, so to speak, the pinnacle, the highest title of a human being. Intellectually, he is completely developed. He's great. He's Odom. And there is just a little impurity left. He didn't make the last step. He didn't pull his second foot just along. But he is very solidly in here. He really knows it all. This little impurity, which shows itself on the skin without much effect, but this makes him so tomei that he comes into a Jewish home and the whole home becomes tomei. That's what it happens. And he cannot be inside the community. He has to be outside. Why are you so angry at him? I'm not angry at him. He is just not for real. This is not what a real human being is. And he can contaminate everyone around him because of his tremendous knowledge and tremendous understanding. On the worldly scale, he is the genius. He knows it all. But he is nowhere. He doesn't represent the truth, the godly truth. He knows it from a worldly perspective. As a result of that, he can contaminate everything that he comes in touch with. This is similar to what you learned in Rashi, that a Metzoirah. What is a Metzoirah? When does one get punished with Metzoirahs? Metzoirah is one who speaks Lashon Hara. He speaks Lashon Hara, he speaks evil things about someone else, about his friend, whatever, about people. This is a similar type of transgression. I didn't touch him, didn't do anything to him. I didn't rob his property, his wealth, his money. I didn't touch him, I didn't hurt him. I spoke about it. Freedom of speech. This is a free country, right? You're going to call, but what do you want me? I speak whatever I want to speak. I'm not hurting him. What happens? He becomes a Metzoirah. Metzoirah reflects exactly his own mentality. Exactly his own mentality. It's nothing wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't hurt him. As a matter of fact, in davening I say, I have him in mind also. Whatever you want, I'm everywhere. I love him and I hate him. I don't do anything. It's all on the surface. And this surface is the most destructive element that we can contrive. For various reasons. Number one, it's all on the surface, so he never does tshuva. I didn't do anything wrong. What do you want? I didn't touch him. And the same thing in terms of learning and davening. I'm learning. I know everything you taught, the whole class by heart. Did you think about it? Did it mean anything to you? What's the difference? I know the whole. There's also, I remember Maharash, there's a story with Rebbe Maharash, but Rebbe Maharash was visiting Peterburg. Peterburg in those days was the capital city. This was like the most modern city. The kings lived there, you know that. And there were a few Jewish, in order to live in Peterburg, you need a special permission. A Jew needed special permission to live in Peterburg. He was a businessman or whatever it is. So Rebbe Maharash was in Peterburg, and there was a Chosid from Rebbe who lived in Peterburg, and he raised his children in Peterburg. So of course his children were religious and so forth, but nevertheless they were exposed to, they studied, they were exposed to the city. So the Rebbe brought his son, this Chassid brought his son to the Rebbe, and he talked to him and he introduced his son, and he says that this son, Rebbe, my son, learned out, that's the expression in Yiddish, he learned out the whole Tanya. He already learned out the whole Tanya. In Yiddish it says, Uzgelernt the ganzen Tanya. He learned out the whole Tanya. So the Rebbe said, no, so what did the Tanya teach him? In Yiddish, it's a direct play on the word. Uzgelernt, and what did the Tanya teach him, learn him? In other words, you can learn out the whole Tanya. So you know what it says in the Tanya, but the Tanya didn't become part of you. You didn't take it in. You didn't swallow it up. You didn't become your own thinking. So what's the point? It's like eating food and that you can digest. Right? So what happens? You spill it right out. The idea of food is to eat it and to digest it. And it should become part of your own physical structure. I once explained it over here, the whole phenomenon of digesting food. We cannot live without food. So what happens? We take a piece of bread, we chew it up, and we swallow it. So how does that give us life? It's still a separate entity. What if I hold the bread in my hand? Why can't I live from holding the bread in my hand? That doesn't work. I have to bring it in my mouth, I have to chew it up, swallow it, and then somehow it gives me life. What happens? What really happens? We have a food pipe. Everybody knows that, an esophagus. That's a food pipe, where when you chew something, it goes into the food pipe. And this food pipe is a very long, and it constantly is processing and it's breaking down the food. It's breaking down the food into very minute components. It breaks it down to components, to the vitamins and the minerals, and everything is broken down. And it's broken down to such a fine level. Understand, please. It breaks it down to such a fine level that it goes through the pipe, it goes through the, through a conduit, like a skin, but it becomes so refined that it goes right through the skin. That part that is able to go through the skin, that becomes the real sustenance. Everything else gets thrown out.
Through the skin?
Through the skin of the pipe.
So it comes out of the pipe?
Not that, it goes right through the skin.
Absorb.
Can absorb. Goes right through the skin. It goes through it. Goes on the other side. That which goes through, that becomes this is what gives us strength. This is what goes into our bloodstream. If anything else goes into our bloodstream, then we get blood poisoning, food poisoning, and it's very dangerous. Before it can go into our bloodstream, it has to be so purified so that the body no longer senses it. It's no longer what's called a foreign object. You know what a foreign object is? Like something from outside. It becomes part of the body. Once it becomes part, it's no longer an outside element, then the body can accept it and then goes into the bloodstream, and then the person lives from it and gives him health. The same is true regarding in Ruchnische growth. We can learn and know things, and it's like having knowledge, having food in your food pipe. I know so much, but in order that this should give us life, in order that this should be part of that which actually with which we identify, which becomes our life source, it has to become so refined and so united with us that it is not a separate thing. So that, yes, we learn Torah, and we know what it says in the Torah. But when do we fully relate to it is not that which remains in our knowledge. It is that we recognize that this is Hashem's Torah, and we unite and we completely connect to that principle. Like I said in Shuman Esrei, you make believe that you're standing in front of the king. I can make believe. Am I a liar? Am I a child? No, it's not. I make believe only because my intellect is not up to it. But I really believe it. This is really the truth. I really recognize this. You want to ask me a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We should think like we're in, think of a king, in a palace, and have visual images.
I'm sorry, what?
Have visual images, like of a king in a palace.
No, you don't need visual images, because the Abba doesn't have visual images. There's a king, and I'm standing in front of the king. No visualizations. We don't need visual things. We don't need visualizations. But I am the king. The Abba is watching over me, like When you wake up, you should right away recognize that the Abba is standing over you and is watching whether you're if you're doing what he wants you to do. So this is different periods of the day, but by Shemoneh Esrei, this is the one moment where we stand and we say, okay, this is it. I'm standing in front of the king. I don't understand it. It doesn't make a difference. This is what permeated. You know what permeated means? Broke through the skin. This is something which I recognize as the truth, whether I understand it or not. This is what was symbolized by the fact that in Eden we received the Torah. How did we receive the Torah? Not by understanding and learning the Torah, but Na'aseh v'Nishma. Because we recognize this is the reality with which we connect. We bring both feet forward. When we bring the second foot forward, that's the real thing. Without that, you can know a whole bunch and you're a Metzoirah, Rahman. A Metzoirah, you're outside of the camp. You can't really connect. You can't really connect. And a Metzoirah, as I pointed out, as odd as it may seem, but once we understand it, a Metzoirah is the most impure living entity that there is. It's an amazing thing.
So, is it that we have to start with Kabbalah Soul, then understand it, then ultimately have Kabbalah Soul in the end? Like, kind of, like we have to like start out like that, but also end up like that?
The Kabbalah soil itself grows as your intellect grows. The intellect does not replace the Kabbalah soil. It grows with you. Okay? But ultimately, whatever you learn, you ultimately know, okay, this is I relate to it as the Torah, as the Nebuchadnezzar's truth. It is true that it is more difficult for a scholar to also be a Kabbalah soilnik than for somebody who is not a scholar. Not a scholar, he doesn't know anything else. There is a saying that the Osid Lovei, and in the Besiches also, the Osid Lovei in the future days when Mashiach will come, so Mashiach will bring tzaddikim to do tshuva. You heard that statement ever? That Mashiach is going to be tzaddikim. In other words, Mashiach will provide for tzaddikim, that tzaddikim will also be zoicha to the same madrege as Baal Tshuva can have. He will also reach up to that madrege to recognize that and want to be connected to Hashem just like a Baal Tshuva wants. It is a more difficult thing. But ultimately, this is what Avodas Hashem is. Nobody wants to, as I said, leave this skin outside and then become a Metzoirah of Mansla. He wants to break through and bring his whole self into it. This is the overall explanation of what was going on in this parsha. I said, Metzoirah, Rashi says, is one who had spoken Lashon Hora. Sometimes the most insignificant things, what seemed to us to be insignificant things, that is the culprit. That is the culprit. This is the guy that does not allow us to recognize what is the truth. What is the truth? No, it's interesting. I explained, I don't know if I explained, I spoke about this here. It's an interesting thing in the Torah. You know, there is Gneva and Gzela. Gneva means you steal in stealth, quietly. You dig into somebody's house, or you find your way into somebody's pocket, and you steal. Gzela is when you come, you break through his door at gunpoint, and you say, you better sit still, or else. And you go through his house, you run through his house. You're a gazla. You come to somebody in the middle of the street, you grab his wallet out of his hand, and you run away. That's gzela. What do you think is a more severe crime? Gneva or gzela? Because that's not the way you think. I'm asking what you think. You're right. Smart aleck. What do you think from a worldly perspective? right? Huh?
We for sure think the opposite.
Yeah, sure. We said Gzeila, of course. And he is right. The Geneva is more severe. Geneva is more severe. And we see it from the halacha. From the halacha that a ganav we don't deal with. He has to pay double, and if he, in a certain cases, you have to pay 4 times and 5 times as much. We don't deal with. A gazlan, all he has to pay is return the gzeil. But he gazled, he has to return. And not only that, the Chachamim say that when the gazlan comes to return the gzeila, we would ask you rather to tell him, you don't have to pay it. Keep it. In other words, if the gzeila, if he rather a watch from you, and he returns the watch, he should accept it. But if he took money, or if the watch is sold, he doesn't have the watch anymore, and he's coming to pay you the loss with money, tell him, I forgive you. You don't have to pay it. That's what the Gemara says. Al Gazlan, you should try to make it easier for him to do tshuva, and he shouldn't have to pay. The Chacham are not happy with those people who accept the loss from a Gazlan. A Ganav, no leeway. Pay up double, and 4 times, and that's 5 times as much. Yeah, what's the explanation? The explanation is a Gazlan, he comes forward, so he offends the human being. His offense is directly on the human being. A human being, okay, you were offended, okay, I forgive you. Just from now on, don't steal it, don't do it anymore. A Ganav, his offense is to Hashem. He didn't do anything so terrible, right? He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't disturb your peace, right? But his offense is to Hashem. He interfered with Hashem's world. And that is where he declared himself to be outside of Hashem's jurisdiction. He measures his crime based on how he affects a human being. That's, what did I do? Where is the truth? Where is your truth? Is your truth in the world, or your truth and you recognize it's Hashem's world? That's what it's about. And that's what the Metzoirah is. I mean, there are many different illustrations. The Metzoirah is the extreme of that. The extreme of that. Doesn't do anything. He just speaks, says a few bad words of somebody else. He just has a little discoloration on his skin. Otherwise, he's a perfect person. He's an Odom. And he is outside of Hashem's camp. Rebbe should help us all. That the first thing, we should have all the clarity and the power, the strength of our souls to declare one simple declaration. I'm on the inside. I belong here. I may have a lot of imperfections, but I'm not staying outside.
Outside Judaism?
Outside of Mebash's camp, jurisdiction. I want to retain my freedom. I want to retain my freedom. I want to retain my so to speak, my freedom to choose. Do I want to be inside or want to be outside? I told you the story. This I think I told you not long ago. But the Rebbe, the Rashab, came into Cheder to test the Cheder. Remember that story? The Frierdiker Rebbe was a little child in Cheder. And his father, the Rebbe, came to the Cheder to test the boys. So I just want you to imagine, the Frierdiker Rebbe was one of the boys, and the other boys were his Chaverim. These were boys who learned very well. They were up in it. They really knew their stuff. And the Rebbe Rashab was sitting and testing them. The Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was one of the boys who tested, he wrote down, since the age of 9, he wrote down everything that he ever experienced. He wrote a diary, everything I experienced. His father told him he should write it down. So he wrote it down. He wrote down this story, that he was sitting in this cheder, and the Rebbe was testing them. And he was a very lively child, just like Ramarash. He was a very lively child, sitting there. And while this was going on, he glanced through the window, and he saw that it was a beautiful spring day. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful spring day. So as he was sitting and being tested, he glanced through the window, and a thought kind of flew through his mind. When will this be over so I can go outside and run in the spring in the sun? That was a quick thought. And the Rebbe, the father, noticed, and he read his thoughts clearly, just straight through. He read him completely, and he stopped the testing, and he said the following words: "It is better to be outside and be looking inside than to be on the inside and be looking outside." It is important that we all understand the significance of this, of being on the inside, with both feet. If I have difficulty, I have difficulty. I have to struggle with it. But to be with one foot out, with one finger out, with the skin out, can contact leprosy. It can make you tumble. You understand the analogy over here? But when you're in the inside, you're a healthy person. You can be different madrigas, infinite madrigas, but you belong here. The decision is made. You're here. Whatever degree you grow, that's what the Rebbe gives you, the kochas that the Rebbe gives you, and your effort depends on your effort. Sure, the more you learn, the more effort you put in. But you're a healthy person. You are in Hashem's camp.
Rabbi, I didn't catch it. What does it mean inside? Be inside.
Being inside, in the case of being inside means inside the Jewish people,
Okay.
inside of Judaism.
Okay.
That's what it means. Being outside means I'm sitting and judging. Do I agree with this or I don't agree with this? Do I like it or I don't like it?
So it doesn't mean like
I'm looking at it from outside,
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
You understand that?
Yeah.
So just to jump in and just to deal with all the problems and everything, but just like
The main thing is to recognize that you are here complete. And if you're not here complete, then you're not really understanding with your full mind. You're still with half a mind.
so it's like it's not talking about you already committed to this, but there's still things in the back that are calling back to you. This is not it.
This is not it, right? And, if they're calling back, it's my struggle, but I belong here. But I'm still thinking, maybe I should try that. That's leprosy. That's leprosy. So it's interesting that the Pasha that's called Metzoirah, this Pasha, speaks about the Tahara Metzoirah, how Metzoirah becomes Toher. All the din of Metzoirahs are in the previous Pasha. That's called Tazriah. All the din of Metzoirahs are all what makes him Tomei and all that. This Pasha that's called Metzoirah, what does it speak about? It doesn't talk about this being Tomei. It talks about he becoming Toher. How does he become Toher? Because ultimately, the whole inyan of Tzoras is to realize and to recognize this mistake and go to the Kohen and to become Toher. So the Rebbe should help him that he should have with the full mind and the full heart and the full soul be able to relate to Yiddishkeit, to the Jewish people, to Torah mitzvahs, without an iota of doubt. And then do all the struggles on the inside. It's a different situation completely. And then Hashem will help that we succeed to continue to walk and progress in a real way. Not stand on one place and look from far away, oh, it looks interesting. That doesn't do it. That's for Malachim. That's a job for Malachim. For us human beings, we have to move in and become part of it.
So how does it tangle the Torah? You said that,
What?
you said the statement in the beginning before the whole thing in relationship to the Torah that I think it's, what was it, that it's always moving or it's always new, it's always applicable to whatever it is now? The Rebbe said.
Oh, that in olden days, now it's years ago, centuries ago, the Tahara of Metzoirah to be make a Metzoirah Toher was something in the future. And now it is very close to the time. Now it's real. That's why we speak. Yeah.
Who's the Kohen for us today?
The Kohen for us today, Yura Mashpia, is the Kohen for us today. Okay? And he is not doing it on his own. He is learning, taking it from the Rabbeim, from all the Chassidus and everything. But there is enough to, and I said, this whole phenomenon today is broken through. It's no longer like it used to be, people standing outside. Now you just have to know that you belong here. And then you become Toher.
It's different.
Yes, it's a different time. Hatzlacha.